Fairies. Fluttering, magical butterfly people that make you think of magic and pastels. But what if a fairy could be cool, bad, punk? What if that fairy just so happened to be a supersonic hedgehog? Welcome back to Loops and Lore. I'm Ben, and today we're going to discuss where this whole Sonic is a fairy theory even comes from. Is there any lore to support? And if so, does it hold up to the world, characters, and story of the games? With all the discussions out there about Sonic specifically, in terms of his character, who he is, and what motivates him, I'm often surprised how often people don't seem to understand what he is. If you were to flag Sonic down mid-run and ask him, he would simply tell you that he was a hedgehog, and he thought that was obvious, before disappearing into a freshly kicked up cloud of dust that would be immediately caught in his own wake. And sure, his physical form is that of a hedgehog, an anthropomorphic one to be specific. Beyond that, Sonic is too free and fun-loving to care about anything else, because that's who he is as a person, a character. But what I'm referring to is what Sonic is as a concept, an idea. And how does that idea take form? So, where does this whole fairy thing even come from? Sonic's original designer is a man named Naoto Oshima. Sorry if I butchered the pronunciation. When the first model for the Paramount movies, which we now call Ugly Sonic, was first revealed, Naoto had this to say. Sonic is a hedgehog-like fairy, so even in a live action, there is no need to make him look like a hedgehog. Even if Mickey becomes live action, he won't turn into a mouse. They are fairies that can only survive if everyone believes in them. It's a small statement, but there is a bit to unpack here. Firstly, what Naoto was saying is that Sonic doesn't need to look hyper-realistic, even if he is being shown in a live-action movie alongside real people. Because Sonic himself is not exactly a hedgehog, but instead a fantasy creature that has taken a form similar to that of a hedgehog. Hence his back covered in spines and being able to roll into a ball, just like a regular hedgehog, but also being blue, break the sound barrier, and wearing sneakers. So trying to make Sonic too realistic actually makes him less believable. And if we stop believing, he stops being Sonic. It's our power of belief that makes him real no matter what world we put him in. But okay, Sonic is an anthropomorphic cartoon character, and like many anthropomorphic cartoon characters, doesn't perfectly resemble the real-world comparison. Naoto also references the mouse, who is one of the countless other examples of characters like this, but we certainly wouldn't refer to all of them as fairies, so why is Naoto-san calling Sonic one? Remember the first things that I told you I think of when referring to fairies? Well, even if you know about fairies, your first instinct is probably no different than mine, which is fine because we're both right. And also completely wrong. Fairies, or more accurately, fae, and their stories are not merely limited to the regurgitated filth that modern media loves to feed us as if we were baby birds incapable of lore of any meaningful substance. But here you are. In actuality, fae are spirits, elementals, and magical beings that can take on any number of forms. Some might appear in more traditional human-like or animal forms, but other fae might look like more fantastical or even monstrous creatures. The powers and abilities they possess are just as varied as are their motivations, and they are more often found out in classical nature rather than in modern civilized settlements. While this is a very brief summary on the topic, it should be enough for you to understand that fairies are not merely limited to tiny pixies and tea parties. In fact, they are often portrayed as mischievous and disruptive to the humans they interact with, which is certainly how Eggman would describe Sonic. Many legends of Fae-like creatures were based on old superstitions that, over time, have been explained away by science. We no longer think of that bad storm as being brought on by an angry spirit, but simply an effect of weather patterns. Of course, this lack of fear also takes away a bit of respect. You're less likely to chop down a tree if there's a chance that a forest guardian might chase you down for it. But if you don't believe in forest guardians, you might chop down a whole bunch of trees, at least until you disturb a hive of cranky bees or a bear that was hibernating. Similarly, Eggman is a man of science and probably thinks nothing of capturing a handful of wild birds and bunnies because nature can always make more. So to him, they're as trivial as throwaway batteries that your local store has shelves of. Sonic, on the other hand, sees each life as precious and sees how Robotnik's machines are polluting his home. So he, like the Fae spirit of legends, steps in to stop the mad scientist. This nature versus man message has always been a part of Sonic's world, though it has never been overstated. With that in mind, the idea of Sonic being a fairy isn't actually that far off. But was the original intention behind the character? Or was that just Naoto-san's opinion? And can we back it up with actual lore? Yes. Yes, we can. And we're going to start with the original lore. Yes. That one. It's a good thing that this is a world filled with reality-altering gems where there was no way that all of this information could possibly fit into one book. Now, the original backstory has two different versions, but we are going to focus on the first one, which I will briefly summarize. In this backstory, a woman named Mary Granite is a well-known writer of fairy tales. But what most people don't know is that her husband is also an Air Force pilot who is attempting to break the speed of sound. Due to a unique case of helmet hair, Mary often tells him that he looks like a hedgehog. The two of them also have a daughter named Sherry, who doesn't get to see her father much due to his military career. In order to ease her daughter's loneliness, Mary tells her fairy tales about a hedgehog named Sonic who can run faster than sound. Clearly inspired by the pilot. As time goes on, the story of Sonic expands to include a multitude of adventures in different locations. And if a bad guy shows up, Sonic will be there to stop him. Though Sherry's favorite story is one about Sonic and his girlfriend, because of how much younger her mother seems whenever she tells it. The next key event takes place on October 14th, 1947, when Chuck Yeager broke the sound barrier, which is true in our world, but in this backstory, on the same day, another test pilot also crossed the sound barrier and did so first, but was tragically lost when the plane exploded shortly afterwards, and no wreckage was ever recovered. They say the lost pilot had Sonic's emblem on his jacket, and while the man's name has been lost to time, the legend of Sonic lives on in the hearts of all pilots since. Later on, in the 80s, an antique dealer named Jeff acquires a vintage flight jacket, and while cleaning it up for resale, discovers it has the image of a snarky-looking blue creature on it, and the word Sonic. One day, a girl named Meg walks into the antique shop and recognizes Sonic from hearing stories when she was a child. Jeff is so impressed by her admiration for the character that he gives her the jacket. Meg is a freelance photographer and takes the jacket with her wherever she goes. One of these trips leads her to an air show. While photographing the planes in action, two of them crash into each other midair and begin to spiral out of control. Not knowing when to call it quits, Meg continues to take pictures and tries to get in closer after the first plane hits the ground. At this moment, the second plane spins around and explodes above her, leaving her trapped in a circle of debris and burning fuel. Suddenly, Meg sees something in the flames. A blue creature reaches out to her, grabbing her hand and telling her to run. The creature pulls Meg to safety and leads her away from the airfield to a hill where Meg collapses. When she awakens in the hospital, the jacket is burned and damaged, the image of Sonic gone, but in her camera lies a single picture she never took of Sonic's shoe. From that moment, Meg decides that she will meet Sonic again. While the second version of this story changes some details, the core elements remain the same. A test pilot is tragically lost while breaking the sound barrier, and his jacket finds its way into the hands of a young girl who falls in love with the jacket and is protected from a fiery accident after the image of Sonic comes to life and leads her to safety before disappearing. As for Sonic, either version perfectly describes him as a fairy tale character, being an image on the pilot's jacket that comes to life to save a girl and then disappears. But regardless of how the Sonic backstory comes to be and is able to become real, it's likely related to the will of all those who believed in him and the pilot he is based on. No different than how we see willpower, or more accurately, the will of the heart, able to affect all manner of things in the games, such as the Chaos or Master Emeralds, and this fits right in line with Sonic being a fairy. Is it relevant? This lore has not been directly referenced in any media that is part of the current narrative, which is probably why most people are quick to just throw it away. But the winged emblem has continued to appear in every classic Sonic game, even the more recent ones, and in Sonic Generations, where starting the game has either Sonic jump out of the emblem and into white space, starting each play session as a callback to that original idea. Not only that, but the story doesn't totally contradict Sonic's world. In fact, it fits it perfectly. In Sonic Adventure 2, we see a young blonde girl who is relieved when the Ark disaster is averted, and on her overalls is a picture of a regular hedgehog, which is kind of an odd choice. Imagine owning a clothing company and decide to put a picture of a hedgehog on it, instead of something more popular and recognizable like a cat or dog or almost any other animal out there. Unless, of course, in this world, hedgehogs are popular. Maybe because a lot of children grew up hearing stories about Sonic. And so, hedgehogs were more commonly featured in children's products. This also plays into the theory of why another character was made in the image of a hedgehog, but that deserves a conversation all of its own. So, regardless of whether or not this lore is still considered to be part of the main narrative, it does still fit in the world of the games, and Sonic's character in it could still be considered a fairy tale creature, making it clear that, at least originally, this could have been Sega's intent, even if it's never been stated outright by the company at large. But now that we have enough suspicion to back up Naoto-san's claim, can we find evidence to support that Sega still considers Sonic to be a fairy in the rest of the games? Virtually all of the classic games contain the same basic plot. Robotnik is enslaving animals to power his machines and build massive weapons platforms for totally normal and sane reasons. These pursuits usually lead to him burning down Paradise to put up a launch base zone, until Sonic shows up, with a finger wave and a spin dash. Sonic here is acting like a force of nature, stopping Robotnik, who acts as a representative of humanity's blind and unyielding march into the future, regardless of the consequences. AI. Sonic is the little mischievous creature that gets in the bad human's way. No different than a rascally rabbit protecting a forest from a hunter, or a small orange creature who speaks for the trees. But okay, that was the classic era, and we are now in the modern world, having adventures that are in locations that feature humans who aren't involved at all, or are sometimes framed as just innocent bystanders. Sure, but the theme still fits, as the actions by other characters like Pakachamak, Eggman, or Black Doom still have looming effects that are all driven by selfish greed at the expense of the planet and all those who live on it. So the theme is still the same. We still have a balance to achieve, but now scale is a lot bigger. Instead of the focus being on a forest of trees and nature, it's a busy city filled with people and families, or an entire planet of people, all who deserve a chance to be happy. So yes, this idea of Sonic having fairy-like qualities is still displayed in the modern era and is still valid, but admittedly, it isn't often that fairies are seen doing all of the things that Sonic does, and it's doubtful that Faye alone would be able to stop someone like Eggman, especially when he invokes powerful machines, magical artifacts, or other creatures to serve his purpose. So, is it accurate to say that Sonic's powers are still like that of a fairy? Could we find another character who could also be described as a fairy, but have powers and enemies on par with Sonic? Well, maybe not in the West, where magic and spirits are often replaced with more scientifically explainable abilities, like those of superheroes. But Japan does have another character who perfectly embodies this idea. Now, I know what you're thinking. Calling Sonic a fairy is one thing, but trying to compare a fairy-like creature to a kaiju is something entirely different. But hear me out, because the two types are more similar than you realize. First, Godzilla is not a kaiju. He's a daikaiju. Kaiju means strange beast, or you could say mythical creature. Daikaiju means great strange beast, or giant mythical creature. And what are fairy tales but stories of strange or mythical creatures? Meaning that Fae and Kaiju are merely European and Asian versions of mythical creatures. Different perhaps in some details, but not always different in that they hold humanity accountable for their actions and keep nature in balance. Now, as far as the two in question are compared, Sonic and Godzilla both started out as a response to humanity's self-destructive choices. Whether that was Sonic stopping Eggman from capturing and polluting the inhabitants of South Island, or Godzilla's warning against the existential threat of nuclear weapons. Both characters have gone through a myriad of iterations, and in some cases had extremely westernized versions that featured very different takes on their story and messaging. But the similarities don't stop there. Sonic and Godzilla have both fought machines, monsters, aliens, and gods. Both of them act as a force of nature that balances the scale of power when humanity or another force pushes things too far, and they both put nature back in the role of supremacy. And while some of the foes they faced had threatened all of humanity, both characters aren't fighting them simply for the heroics of it. Sonic doesn't consider himself a hero. He does what he feels is right, not just what is objectively good. Now, as for Godzilla, he is often fighting monsters because they disturbed him in one way or another. No different than an animal chasing a foe away from its den. And even when Godzilla is framed as a villain, it's still acting as a direct result of humanity's reckless actions. And the best place to see that kind of thing on display in Sonic's world is in Sonic Adventure. The original start to the modern era has a lot of Godzilla references, and it's not just obvious things like Mecha Sonic being an obvious reference to Mecha Godzilla. Perfect Chaos looks strikingly similar to a watery version of the monster Biollante from Godzilla vs. Biollante, and spoiler alert for that movie, Chaos in Tikal's farewell scene is almost identical to the way the spirit of Erica is released from Biollante as it disintegrates into particles and floats off into space, but the key element occurs right after. Standing in the ruined station square, Tails says to Sonic, "All's well that ends well, right?" But then the camera shifts to show Sonic jumping off the broken road and off into the distance as we, the audience, are left to look on as the sunlight breaks through the storm. Left to contemplate how the actions of Pachytramac and Eggman, combined with the anger of Chaos, has created so much destruction. Right there. Did you catch it? In many of Godzilla's adventures, once the Big G has either won a battle or gotten fed up with the humans, it returns to the ocean, leaving a path of destruction behind it. Godzilla doesn't lower his head in shame like a dog that's been called bad by his master, because he has no master. Kind of sounds like my dog. Godzilla is never made to clean up his mess, and that's because it was never his mess in the first place. Godzilla is a monster, created by man's self-destructive habits, and whenever he acts on behalf of nature to restore balance, any losses that humanity incurs and the resulting cleanup is part of the cost associated with balancing those scales. Sonic is really no different in that way. While we could assume that Tails' line is meant to assure us as the player that all the humans were okay, probably saved off screen by the rest of the cast, there is still a huge mess to clean up. But for Sonic, the story is over. Eggman is defeated, at least for now, and Chaos's heart has been opened. So the evil spirit that brought this dangerous storm is no longer a threat, and balance has been restored, even if not everything was set back to the way it was. Similarly, after the events of Adventure 2, the Ark is still a looming threat for the people of Earth, knowing that the space station and its laser cannons still hang above them. A threat that could have been realized in Shadow the Hedgehog, and either way, serves as a continual reminder of what happens when greed pushes a good man to desperation. Even though the Ark is used to stop the Black Arms, the massive weapons platform can be accessed at any time by gun forces via a space shuttle that they have ready to launch at a moment's notice, meaning that whomever is in charge of the military in Sonic's world has the ability to enact martial law, a military takeover, but of the entire planet. Even with that aside, the world is under constant threat by Eggman, alien invaders or supernatural beings that are trapped beneath the planet's crust. Yet, Sonic and his friends haven't gone out of their way to form a League of Justice. They aren't police. They're creatures who are free to come and go, just like Fae or Kaiju. Only getting involved in matters that involve humans when they find it necessary to do so. This is further backed up by Amy's dialogue to Shadow during Sonic Adventure 2's last story, where she tells him, "I know that people fight over the most trivial things.
Some people may be selfish, like the professor said. But they're basically good if they try their best and never give up on their wishes. They always have a reason to be happy. That's why you should help them out. Saving them is a good thing."
This perfectly sums up the role of a mythical creature in its interactions with humanity. Notice that it's keeping or giving up on their dreams that determines whether or not a human is good or evil, and perfectly separates Maria from Gerald. One never gives up on their dreams even when faced with a cruel death, while the other trades their dreams for a cold and relentless revenge. Shadow's role here is no different than Sonic's role in the classic games, and no different than the roles of Fae or Kaiju in their stories. The key change for Sonic games is that we see the story from the role of the creatures as opposed to the humans that they interact with, which is a major change that keeps these stories from feeling like a fairy tale, which are often told from the perspective of the observing human, not the creature itself. So, is Sonic a fairy? Honestly, I think so. Or perhaps it's more accurate to say that I believe so. And as Naoto-san said, as long as we continue to believe in Sonic, he will continue to exist. Which is really a lesson we should keep in mind about ourselves. When we stop believing in ourselves and in our dreams, we forget who we are and we stop existing. You may not be a fairy, but you should still believe in yourself. Sonic does. And with that, I'm Ben. This has been Loops and Lore. Thanks for watching.